Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
You know, we've gotten a lot of emails about this topic. We've gotten a couple of questions via text message. And I think the three of us have sat around and wondered just about this topic ourselves. Do any of you guys, you still don't have any solar panels on your operations, do you?
I do.
You've got solar at your place. Because I knew we were talking about it. I didn't know if you actually went forward with getting some solar. We might be able to put you right up there next to Joeseph as an expert on this episode. So this will be a lot of fun. We've got Joeseph Murphy here. He's the president of SunChoice, and him and his partner founded that company in 2019. So we have some really relevant points to talk about today. Welcome to the podcast, Joeseph.
I appreciate being here.
So give us a little bit of background on yourself and why you decided to build up a company in solar.
So I've been in the solar industry for just over 15 years, and I started on the residential side. And down the line, I mean, I've worked for, quite a few companies and ended up getting into doing solar projects in the, commercial setting. And my family used to have a dairy operation, and, just the cost of operating their business caused them to close down. So it's always been a little bit of a sore spot. So once I saw what this could do in a commercial setting, I immediately realized how beneficial this would be for agriculture. So at that point, me and my partner at the time, we put together SunChoice Energy only to focus on agriculture.
Wow.
And it's been making a huge difference.
And you're based out of where?
We're based out of Greenville, South Carolina, but we do projects all over the U.S.
So you'll travel all over, or do you have offices everywhere, or is it all coming out of Greenville?
Everything's coming out of Greenville,
okay.
But I don't mind traveling at all.
Yeah, have
Just
panels.
get in the car and go.
Have panels. We'll travel.
I'm no stranger to some windshield time.
Yep.
So as we introduce this topic, how does solar even work?
So it's a great question to ask. So the way that we do it is we want to integrate with what you already currently have. So essentially what we do is we tie the panels right into the grid. So essentially what's going to happen is you have your solar panels that are going to be producing DC energy that goes through an inverter that converts that to AC energy that you can use for your business or your farm, right? So what you're doing is you're using that energy first, and any excess energy that you have is going back to the grid for you to use later. And there's different things like net metering and bilateral and avoided cost, which I can get into.
I think Tanner is even trying to break it down to even more elementary, like how does the actual solar panel take a beam of light and turn that into energy?
So the actual cells in the panel have a chemical reaction that produce electricity, and then that's transmitted. So it's just raw DC energy, and then that's transferred to an inverter, and then obviously that has to be converted, to AC energy that you can use.
Okay.
For the operation.
So the panel itself has chemicals in it, or there's a chemical reaction happening with the material in the panel.
Correct.
Wow. I don't think did you know that?
I had no idea. I mean,
yeah,
I knew what came out of it. I just didn't know how it worked.
Sure.
And isn't there terms like solar voltaic, solar hydronic, and other terms like that? One is, so some guys have solar panels that heat the water in their house, like hydro. Okay, and then the voltaic, you're doing what you're talking about, creating it to voltage, correct?
Correct.
Is there other forms? Is there other solar? I know we can heat water, and I know we can create electricity. Is there any other kind of solar?
Those are the only two that I've personally ever dealt with. I've focused on the photovoltaic side.
Okay.
And when it comes to, there's a lot of renewable energies, right? We have wind and water and all that kind of stuff. Where does solar rank in terms of efficiency and cost and all that kind of stuff?
As far as efficiency and, realistic applications for most people, solar is going to be, the number one option. The beautiful thing about solar itself is there's no moving pieces. So the maintenance itself is minimal, if nothing at all. So that seems to be the best application, especially in an agricultural setting. And you could do everything from roof mount these panels to ground mount these panels.
Let's talk about that for a second. So you talk about roof mount. So one of the things, guys, that I considered in my house, so I put it on my house there, Joseph, and but my house has a metal roof. And I'm looking at all these other folks that are putting them on their house, and I'm thinking those shingles are going to come to fruition here after a while. They're going to have to take all them blooming doggone solar panels off, and it's just going to be that much more expensive. So I really looked at doing like a mounted panel system on the ground, but then taxes got the better of me, and I don't know if this is still part of it, Joseph, but you used to be able to write off the fastener as well as the solar panels themselves for taxes. So I looked at my building as the fastener. Could I depreciate the value of my building as well as it's the fastener? That's a fastener. Because that's what we had to do. And so some tax accountants said yes, and so we'd put them on our shop. So we didn't end up putting it on our house. We put it on our shop. Right. You said you were in houses. So how many people have a problem with putting it on their shingles?
So I think part of the problem and why there's a stigma in solar in general, you hear good experiences, bad experiences. I think people need to set realistic expectations and kind of tell everybody, the good, bad, and the ugly. Obviously, if you're going to install solar panels on your roof, you got to think at some point you're going to have to take those panels off. You're going to have to re-roof. If you put solar panels on your roof, you do have to go through the shingle, and ideally what's happening in a residential setting, when you put the panels on the roof, you want that bolted into the rafter tail. On the commercial side, especially if you have a flat roof, you can do a ballasted system to where there's no roof penetration. I do everything in my power to, if we can, do a ground-mounted system, just so there's nothing to worry about, over the long term. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because anything pertaining to the project itself, whether it be the roof, whether trees need to be removed, that falls into that tax credit as well.
Yeah.
So the building is the fastener.
The building is the fastener.
Yep. So you could build a shed as the fastener?
Yes.
A $200,000 shed? Really?
And then it might be part of the credit. The one thing that in Iowa, so I don't know if this is everywhere, Joseph, so you'll have to help me out with this. But one thing I learned through the process, we talk about these inverters. So he's taking DC and turning it to AC. In Iowa, if you mount it on a building, supposedly by the code, this is what I was told, that you have to have, each individual panel has to have their own inverter. Versus my buddy, Phil, down the road, he has it on the ground. He's got an agriculture operation, and he put it and made his operation. They have line inverters, so they're wired in series, rather, so that if one goes out, it's the one inverter controls that whole string of panels versus just one individual panel. Is that kind of true across the country, or is that just an Iowa thing?
I think that... that's actually a good question, and this is why it's important to have the right people out there doing your installation to make sure that they look through absolutely everything. Interconnection agreements, making sure you understand what has to happen as far as permitting. But as far as inverter goes, you have string inverters, you have micro inverters. Typically, if you have a huge problem with shading, you want to stay with anything that's going to keep it on one particular string, because if those panels start to get shaded, it's going to knock out and affect the production on the rest of them.
Interesting.
So that's another reason why, solar is such a good fit for agriculture. For the most part, we don't really run into any type of shading issues as well.
Now, I was talking with, since I was kind of in the solar game, I was talking with the farmer from Minnesota, guys, and they can put up to one solar farm, solar unit, I'll word it that way, on each one of their properties, but only under one name. So when we start naming our farms different, Whitaker Properties LLC, Whitaker Marketing Group Properties, then they got an incentive from the state of Minnesota to create energy and got paid back. So when you think about what you get paid back, and Joeseph talked to this, you talked about net metering earlier. Mm-hmm. So I have a real problem with net metering. Here's my problem. My cooperative does not offer net metering. That's my problem. So I originally sized my entire shop, and I'm thinking, awesome, this is going to zero. I'm not going to pay anything on my electric bill. Not so much. By the time I got done, we cut it in half because they did not do any net metering. So I buy it at 12 cents per kilowatt hour. All they'll pay me back is 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So I did not want to oversize my system at all. Now, my buddy Phil has got this deal over here, different company. He's with a different energy company. They net meter. So he overproduces. So he oversized his system. So all summer long, he overproduced. And in the winter, when we don't get as much solar energy, it pays back. Mine doesn't do that. The other thing is, if I have geothermal, you're already getting a credit on the geothermal. They wouldn't credit me that. So I think it really depends on what Joeseph said. Who's your company? Yeah. Get all the details, because it wasn't nearly as incentivized as what I thought it was going to be.
Like I said, realistic expectations are really important, and the expertise that the company has coming out to meet with you. I'm very clear and very thorough with everybody. Before we even put together a proposal, not only do we go through all the interconnection paperwork, we reach out to the electricity company, whether it be the bigger companies or the co-ops. We reach out directly to them just to go over that interconnection and make sure everything's current. So very thorough. Now, I've met with people that are with a co-op that heard the stories. Oh, well, there's no net metering. This isn't going to make sense. The reality is when you're dealing with an avoided cost, especially, typically you can cover anywhere from 50 up to 70% of the power for a good return. Right. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that every client that I meet with gets the best return on this investment. And that's typically where you want to stay. As far as batteries for farm and commercial, and this I'll have to say, in my opinion, in my engineer's opinion, it's just not there yet for it to make sense financially and just technologically. So we want to keep everything dealing directly with panels. But anything with a co-op typically is going to be like a bilateral meter. Avoided costs. So you really do want to watch how big you build the system.
So when you're saying bilateral, you're meaning that we're using energy from the cooperative or the electrical company, but then we're also sending it back to what I'm going to call the grid. So it goes both ways. And you also mentioned batteries there, and I considered batteries, but like you said, they just weren't fiscally there yet to store. There's a thing called a Tesla wall. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Mm-hmm. And it's just a huge battery you put in your wherever. For farms, though, if they're creating a lot, the one thing, because we didn't do net metering, I thought about putting in a huge battery system, and I think you can write those off on taxes as well.
Correct. So all of that is going to fall in line when it comes to the tax credit as well. We started our company, really just to help out agriculture in every single way that we can. And I just can't seem to make sense of batteries, to push that at all, especially when any ag operation that you're going to deal with. And most of what we've been dealing with is, poultry, hog, turkey. They already have their generators. Mm-hmm. So battery as a backup, you would need so much, and you would need a lot of battery for that to even quantify and make sense. And then just the lifespan of the battery itself.
Right.
I would my suggestion would be just stick with solar till it gets a little bit better.
Yeah, we looked into it at our hog site, which, oh gosh, it was probably 5 years ago now that we looked at it, and our power company does not net meter. And the life of our, hog site is, Tanner, 40 years probably max? Yeah. I mean, if you treat it well, maybe 30 if not. And we were already past 20 years. And it was going to go past, the payback was too far, basically. We didn't know if we were going to get to the end. And so we chose not to, but it made a lot of sense at the hog site to either go on the roof or in between the barns and the ground that we're not using. But it was just, it's very disappointing when a company does a net meter. And I guess I'd love to hear the conversations of why they do or don't net meter, because a unit of power to me, no matter where it comes from, is a unit of power, right? So why is it not worth it to them if it's going back to the grid? They got to get it somewhere. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Not a question, just a rant.
That's a conversation that comes up quite a bit. I mean, the reality is solar in itself and what it's going to do for you. You have a system on site, right? You basically have a small power plant. The same reason we own our business rather than rent our business, right? It gives us that control as far as the power that you're going to be producing. That power you're producing isn't going to ever inflate, right? You own that power. So even if it's a 10, a 20, a 30, a 40% offset, it's better than not offsetting any of your power,
Right.
And right now, especially, the tax credit went from 26% and it went back up to 30%. And a couple of things that I'm really trying to get out there is how this tax credit works right now. So it's a federal tax credit. It's dollar against your, your taxes. But what they did with it is now you can carry that tax credit back 3 years, and you can carry that tax credit forward for 22 years. So there's more incentive with that tax credit right now.
How would you carry that back 3 years? You actually go back on your taxes?
Right, so correct. And that would be a great conversation to have with your tax accountant.
We should have kept Bill on.
We should have kept him on for a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, you can depreciate the equipment, just like anything else on the farm. And then, the REAP grant, the USDA REAP grant, is what really pulls everything together right now. Last year it was covering 25% up to 500,000, and now for 2023 up to 2024 is covering 50% of the cost of the project up to $1 million. So right now we're seeing paybacks as little as could be as soon as a year. It really all depends.
So let's talk about that, because as with any alternative form of energy, there's opposition. We've got tax credit options here. We've got the opportunity to kind of air through what is being thought. Like, we've got those that protest windmills. Mm-hmm. We've got those that protest hydroelectric dams. We've got opposition everywhere. What's the opposition to solar panels?
So what I tend to run into a lot, especially the conversations that I have, I think most people think, especially my company when we come in, that we're trying to do these large solar farms that take up, hundreds of acres of land. That is absolutely not what we do. All we want to do is focus on your particular operation, reduce your operating costs, so you can, we really just want to keep agriculture going. So that's what you're going to see a lot is, people having a problem with solar because they're taking up, large acreage of land. Essentially, farmers are leasing out their land. You got developers coming out here, putting up, acres of solar panels and then just, dumping that energy back into the grid. So I just want there to be some clarity. Not every company that's, coming out to talk to you is trying to, eat up the land. And that's the last thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to take up the least amount of space as possible, to help your operation become more profitable.
Yeah, we definitely know we have a lot of listeners that are militantly against the taking of acres for that, because we've talked about it on the show before, and those shows have done really well because they get on there and they scream pretty loud. And Gavin Spohr, a guest that we've had on a couple times, young farmer in Missouri, is losing 400 acres this year to solar panel farm.
Well, and I have,
But that's a landlord decision, right?
That's a landlord. It's not
That's
his.
not
If you own the land, you make the decision.
see, and I have a client right now that they want to sell, but he got approached by a solar company because he is right next to where they can tie in. So there is a substation there, like adjacent to his property or on his property. And they offered to take his 400 acres, but they will pay 3 times what the cash rent is.
Yeah, like $1,200 an acre or something like that.
So,
All right, so you sell it to Corey and I, and you, all 3 together, and then we sign the lease with the solar company.
I don't know.
I don't think it's going to work. But what's the ability to pay that for some of these solar companies to be able to come in and 3 times the revenue to a landlord?
That's a great question aside that I never wanted to get into because I personally don't believe in it. While I completely understand why a landowner would do that, I mean it's kind of hard to ignore the fact of how much money that they'd be paying you for that land. But the reality in that sense is those panels are producing so much energy, and essentially what they'd be setting up with the utility company is they're now a power provider, right?
Yeah.
Whoever owns that site. So they're getting paid directly, which is going to be a very, very low cost, but because they have so many panels out there, I mean, they're getting a large return, and then in turn, they could spend that extra money.
well, and think of it from the landowner side, guys, is this gentleman, he's got $10 million in farmland, if not more, maybe 12, was asking me to sell it. And then he got this offer 3 times the revenue, and here he is making over $500,000 a year just in an annuity. Doesn't have to do anything. It's a long-term lease. I think it was 50 years, and it came with an increase in it. So you already have your cash negotiation already negotiated at the front end that you're going to make more money down the road, and it will, an escalation clause in there.
Perpetual lease, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that what that's called? Kind of like towers and
Escalator.
and things like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the landlord, I told him, I'd love to sell your farmland, but on the other hand, you have the perfect setup here. You're making crazy money for, yeah. And
Has there been any farms sell that have solar panels on them?
Not that I know of. Wind turbines, yes. And normally we just figure in a cap rate on what that is. So when we figure in the cap rate, I think solar panels would be the same. Just figure in a depreciable cap rate on it and then add that.
So, Joseph, as you look at farms that have solar panels on their hog barns or the sites that you've set up, what's that do to the value of that asset if they go to sell it?
Considering that it's reducing an operating cost, it is going to increase the value of their farm. I mean, there's no other way to see it. And it's more, right, if you were going to go in and you were going to purchase a business, especially if you already have previous experience, with that same business, and you understand that operating cost for electricity and know that that's going into this one, it's cut in half, 80%. And then you have an identical farm next to it without it. I mean, it's going to be more appealing going for, the farm that has that reduced operating cost. So yeah, it will increase what you could get for that business if you turn around and sell it. And the beauty about it right now is, putting together projects for folks is not only do the incentives, not only is it, pretty much a 1 to 2 year payback, but when you add up all of those incentives, the incentives alone pay for the system. And what we've been seeing lately because of the increase of that REAP grant is there's additional money in incentives. So not only are the incentives paying for it, but you still have additional incentives left over. And that's not including, what you're saving for utility costs every year.
So we talked about the REAP grant, and I'm actually going through that on REAP has a very large list of things that qualify for payment, and we are capitalizing that on raising the efficiency of our corn dryer, and then some of our fans on our bins and motors that move grain, and we're replacing a diesel motor with an electric motor. All qualifies. We're still in the process. 6 months in here, 5 months in, still in the process of trying to get approved. Like, how does that look for solar? Do you guys help them with that process? Is there someone else that does it?
So we do everything. Everything we do is turnkey. I've talked with a lot of USDA REAP representatives. It's very important to be thorough on all the information that you get them, making sure you have absolutely everything signed. We go a little bit further we constantly follow up with the USDA, just to kind of see. You want to make sure that you get everything into them as well. Because if you miss out on any information, that's just going to delay the process. And in some instances, it's really going to knock you out of the running. Now, what happened with the REAP grant is because they changed everything to quarterly, it's taken them a little bit longer to get approval for people. So to be fair for them, they're working so hard. Every time I call these guys, I mean, they're going through an application, going through this, going through that, going through just a new way of dealing with REAP. Best suggestion that I have is if you're going to do any of these, projects, be very thorough, get on the phone with them when you submit an application, see if they have a little time to review it with you. So you make sure you got everything in. We're dealing with, I don't want to say an issue. Typically, it usually takes about 30 to 45 days to get a decision. In some cases now, it could take 60 to 90 to 120. So they're just trying to work it out. But the beautiful thing about it is that if you do get your REAP grant in and everything is good as far as the application, and they'll let you know whether they have a full submitted application. If you don't get selected in a particular period, it will roll over to the next selection, and that'll just continue to happen throughout the process. So you have a very strong chance of getting that REAP grant.
I think that's what happened with us, is it got rolled over.
You got rolled? You got rolled over twice, maybe?
Yeah. But it sucked because we couldn't start tearing down and putting back up until like the application was in the system, or they said we could, so like we were waiting, and then they rolled us, and it's like, well, dang it, we would have started the project and not pushed it into harvest.
Right.
But whatever, that's the hoops you got to jump through.
Right.
Yep.
Joseph, I'm also looking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say just one more thing I wanted to add to that. If you're doing any kind of project, whether it be solar or what you're dealing with right now, if your decision is based off of whether you're getting that grant money, I would 100% not move forward until you are selected.
Right.
100%.
Right. Which is hard to do when on some of these bigger projects, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we don't do. We're not moving forward with any project until somebody gets selected. Now, to be fair, if they're, if someone's pushing us and they really want to do it and they don't care if they get the grant money, that's the only differentiator. But yeah, we're not moving forward until you get selected for that grant.
Right.
So I was also looking here too that you can get the grant, but the USDA also has loan programs that you could borrow for the cost of your system as well.
Correct. Yeah. So I think they have guaranteed loans up to 80% now, and the interest rates are very appealing, from my understanding.
Wow.
Looks like 75% of the total eligible cost.
That's impressive, because that would go a long ways, especially if you're sitting in a cash type position or you want to put your cash to work somewhere else.
Well, and their loans are normally a lot cheaper than we could get at the bank as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So do we have an answer if I ask you how much this is going to cost me that we could share with our listeners for a ballpark? Is there something broad you can provide?
Oh, man, that is the most loaded question that I get.
Yeah.
I'm sure you knew that before you asked it. I could say honestly, it really does depend on the size. There's not a one size fits all. I mean, I'd love to give you a range, but the range is so broad.
It's not like It's not like $500 a panel or something.
Yeah, I mean, you could be looking at a cost of a system of anywhere from 80,000 to 500,000. I mean, we have projects we're working on that are just so large, we're $2-3 million. But the fact remains the same is that their return is still within 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
How about
if you can?
How about breaking it down into so much per kilowatt? So if your farm is going to be a 12 megawatt farm a year, then as people size it, they say, hey, I'm going to have a 40 megawatt farm. Do they have a size of what it takes to get that? I'm sure it's based on how much sun you get too. So, but if you're in Minnesota, there's the X amount of sun. I mean, is there so much per megawatt?
So as far as typically you'll see costs range from, and it, like I said, the bigger the project, typically the more that can be reduced as far as costs,
I got
kilowatt. You. So you could be looking at anywhere from what I've seen is anywhere from, $2 up to $3,
Gotcha.
per kilowatt.
Let's ask it this way, because I don't really give a crap whether I spend $10 or $1 million.
Right.
You mentioned 1 to 3 years. I mean, what's a good time frame for payoff, and what's some of the, if it's this long, I wouldn't be doing it type of deal?
So it's clarity in the meeting, right? Can you use that federal tax credit? Mm-hmm. Do you have the tax appetite? But the beauty, this can be multiple podcasts, right? Because you can also sell the tax credit now. They literally changed everything in 2023. So even if you don't have that tax appetite, you can sell off that tax credit. But if you can use the tax credit, you can use the depreciation, and you get the REAP grant. Like I said, you're looking at a 1 to. I really haven't seen anything more than 2 years. But when you're looking at a payback like that, this is obviously assuming that you can pay for this cash, right?
Right.
If you have a 5-year loan, your payback's 5 years. I mean, we even have an option to where, you have a 20-year amortized option. That way, you don't have to come out of pocket at all. You can reduce your cost to where you're paying much less, for that loan than you are for power, and still take advantages, of those credits. That's typically a win-win. There's no prepayment penalties on that as well. So.
And is that tax credit, you have to make enough money to get a tax credit. It's not just like, hey, we wrote off $50,000. You had to have made $4 million to have extra revenue that you get a tax credit against it, correct?
I mean, that's really the best conversation. I wish we still had the other guy on the line. But it goes against any tax liability that you have. So, I mean, it really depends on how creative your accountant is. And I've noticed too that we've sent some information off to accountants, and they just didn't have all the information about what's going on with solar now with the Inflation Reduction Act. That's changed everything with the tax credit. So typically when we send out information now, we get in touch with the accountant, make sure they have all the updated files. Haven't really came across a situation where, a financial advisor, accountant hasn't looked at this and said, you should do this immediately. Right.
Yeah. So,
because I feel like I've had the folks swing by the house, knocking on the doors, leaving their door hangers out, and the payback was not nearly as fast, at least the way they had presented it.
Didn't seem like it.
Yeah, I felt like it was 20 to 25 years at the fastest.
Right. Yeah, when it comes to residential, the only thing you can use is that federal tax credit. There's no depreciation. There's no grants available. So that changes the entire landscape as far as payback.
Then you got to look at it on your roof.
You got to look at it on your roof.
I don't personally like them on the roof of my house. Like, I chose a hip roof because I like the way the hip roof looks. I don't want to see the solar panel. But that's just my opinion. Some people might like it differently.
I planned when I built my shop that it'd be on the back side where we wouldn't see it when we drive up. Most people don't even know we have it.
Yep.
Obviously, I didn't. I sat here at the beginning of the show saying, did you have it? Do you have it? And Dave's like, well, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's different brands of everything. We got different brands of tractors. We got Ford, Dodge, Chevy, and then there's different, Cadillac and different cars. I mean, is there different kinds of solar panels that are better than others?
It's a really good question. I typically use something called Canadian solar panels. It's just it's a panel that I've used since I've been in solar. I've seen enough people have a good experience with them over the last 15 years that's pretty much what I stick by. But the warranties on these panels, the warranties on these inverters are great. So most panels, across the board, the efficiency between the efficiencies of each panel, it's neither here nor there. You just kind of choose the panel size you want. Typically have a 25-year power output warranty, 10 to 15-year manufacturing warranty on the panel themselves. And what's nice about the power output warranty is even after 25 years, at that 25-year mark, these panels are still producing over 80% of the power that they were doing day one. So it's super, the technology is super impressive, and we're at a point right now where if the technology gets any better, it's going to be very small and incremental.
Okay. So the life, you said it's 25-year warranty. What's a typical life of a solar panel?
Yeah. So if you figure after 25 years, you're still producing 83 or 85%, it's going to start to degrade a little bit quicker, probably like 1% a year. So you're going to get a good, 30 to 45 years with the panels.
And say we have a solar array on our hog site. I was always told, like, if a hailstorm comes through, you could replace them as needed. Does your company come replace? I need one panel replaced. Are you coming to do that, or is there like a sub in the area that can come do that?
Yeah. So I mean, us, if you're just talking about SunChoice, if you have an issue with anything, we're out there fixing it. We also do a 5-year bumper, which I haven't seen yet. We do a 5-year bumper to bumper warranty on literally everything that could happen out there. After that, we set up, like an ongoing maintenance with you. We monitor the system for you. We set it up to where you can monitor it yourself. And if there's any issues, we're out there, figuring out, troubleshooting, and, fixing anything.
What about insurance wise? You said you cover bumper to bumper. When I bought mine, they told me they did not cover hail damage. And hail damage, they basically said, well, if you have that much hail damage, enough to break the glass on the solar panels, that you probably have enough hail damage, you're going to make a claim on your building because it's going to be dented like a son of a gun. And
your fastener.
What's that?
Your fastener.
Yeah, my fastener. And so but they specifically told me to make sure we get it insured. So I have an extra insurance policy for the solar.
100%. You're definitely going to want to have an insurance policy. I mean, we're going to cover everything, obviously, outside of act of God. So another thing too, I mean, these panels are strong. You could pull up on YouTube videos, people shooting, little ice balls at these panels. It's going to hold up relatively well with hail too. So it's going to take quite a bit to do some damage. I've heard stories with other people that I know in the industry that have done, projects, overseas, and, you get a huge hailstorm that destroys the entire building, and the only thing left standing were the solar panels. So.
Right. So you said there's no moving parts, but you did say that if there's some maintenance that needs to be done, what is something that commonly occurs? I mean, imagine it's a wiring issue or something.
If anything, a lot of it could, be an update, could be, maybe an issue with the wiring or a bad panel. But typically, after the installation is done, the system is checked and fired up, making sure all the panels are working properly, inverters are working properly. If you have the right company out there doing the work, they're going to make sure that all the equipment is tip top before they get out of there.
Right.
But typically, if you start having any issues, it's going to be within that first year. After that, if you're not having any issues, you're pretty much in the clear.
Okay. Interesting. So a lot of this is driven off tax credits. Obviously, it makes it really attractive for the purchaser. right? Because it lowers our time frame down of our payback. Obviously, that helps you guys. You guys are putting more systems in and getting paid. What happens if in 5 years someone gets into office and this whole green thing is out the door and there's no tax credits? Can solar stand on its own, or are we working to that point?
Can solar stand on its own with nothing? I think 100% it can, especially, in a business setting. If you're obviously, most people's plan when they start the business is they don't plan on going out of business, right? So rather than having that 1 or 2 year payback, it could take 9 or 10 years. But if you plan on keeping your, business going for 25, 30 years, it's going to, more than pay for itself.
Mm-hmm. I was just looking there at a couple of different options. It seems like there's a lot of competition in the area right now. There's probably a lot of incentives that are being providing that motivation to continue sell and push. But it's been interesting because our listeners, I think, for almost a year have been asking us to do a show to try and get some more information out of it. I'm happy we learned there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different things to consider.
Mm-hmm.
You guys
100%.
You guys got any more questions that you've got jotted down?
I think I've gotten through most of mine.
Joseph, did we miss anything that you think would be important for our listeners to know?
I would say this. If you're going to do any of these projects, make sure you're comfortable with the person that you're talking with, right? You have a level of trust in them, right? You should, if you meet with somebody about this, you should be excited about doing it and excited about doing it with them. Don't just take anybody's word for what they're giving you. Make sure that goes to your, tax accountant. If you're going to go with the REAP grant, make sure that you're going with a company that's, essentially going to hold your hand throughout the process and make sure that things are done right for you. So I would say best advice I have for you is make sure that you're confident in the integrity of the company that you're working with. And I think you'll just have a great experience. Truly.
I like that. I was so badly holding back a really terrible joke that I reminded me of what my grandpa said. He said, make sure that you're happy doing it and happy doing it with the partner you have. And that's the same thing he said about me when I was looking for a wife. So it would.
At the end of the day, it really is a marriage. That's the whole premise of what we do. I mean, after the job is installed, we're with you moving forward. The relationship should not end there. And if you feel at any point that the relationship is going to end there, you probably shouldn't do it.
So would you tell customers, one thing I looked for was I did not go with the cheapest company. I went with the one that's been in business the longest. And normally I don't go that route because who's been in business longer, Kmart or Amazon? Okay, well, who's better in that route?
Right.
Okay, so being in business the longest doesn't mean anything. But in this case, I want to know longevity and that they're not going to go belly up because there's some tax incentive out here. So I strategically went for a company that's probably been in the service game to be able to service them locally as well. And that was for houses. How about for agriculture? Are they, I'm hoping that you can service these for 20 years. And of course, no business wants to go out of business, but
things happen.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm glad that you brought that up. We purposely, when we started this company, we wanted to protect, our clients as much as we could. We also have a partner in what we do that's a technologies company that's very strong, and then they also have another backing that's very strong. There's no way to guarantee that you're not going out of business, but if you set the right expectations, you show people how this works. You explain the warranties, on the panels and the inverters. I think you're going to have a good experience. And I think if you're educated enough, even in your worst case scenario, I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood since you brought that up, right?
Yep.
I think if you're educated enough, even if the company that you're dealing with does go out of business, you'll still be okay because the warranties that you have on the panels, could be serviced by somebody else that's doing it as well.
Gotcha. I got one more question. You ready?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Do you have solar panels on your house or in any of your operation?
That's a loaded question. On the house that I build, I'll put solar panels. One of the reasons why I got out of residential solar, quite honestly, I didn't like what was going on in that industry. I felt like things were being way overpromised to people. This federal tax credit is not this magical check that you get in the mail at the end of the year. You have to have the tax appetite to be able to use this. So that's what kind of forced me, out of this.
Fair enough.
Oh, I got one too now.
Yeah, let's go.
What about I've seen all these cool solar tech, like making roads out of solar panels, like, individual bricks, or then like you have the sunflower that it looks like a big flower and then it puts out all its solar panels and it follows the sun around.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys offer? Any cool, trendy, or do you see that kind of stuff?
You want a sunflower outside the studio.
Well,
I
like it when they make
SunChoice.
tech better, right? Like, okay, this captures the sun way more efficiently because of this, or like the road thing, or like a school parking lot. Like, well, people are driving on it anyway. Might as well, get some sun.
Right. It's so funny that you bring up those two particular things, because once I saw that, I started diving in. I'm like, man, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be more of a, and to be fair, I don't know enough about it. It's more of like a PR thing. I think it'd just be cool to have in front of your building, just to kind of, get a little of attention. I think those roads are a little ways off. And then once you get into other countries, as far as solar, it works a little bit differently out there. They actually have tracking systems with their solar, so you'll actually see motorized panels that follow the sun. I think we're just kind of blessed in the sense that we can use stationary panels and it, really help you out.
Hear me out, Tanner.
Get on that. Yeah.
Hear me out. We need a parking lot.
I was just getting ready to say
And
that.
if I could take the power that I banked up and not have to push snow off of it because it heated
it
itself,
can melt it. Yep.
like, I'm in.
There you go.
Yep. So
I
let's
like
do
this. Well, that's good. And which one of you guys wants to try and summarize this? You're going to stick that on me.
That's your job.
Okay, then you guys fight over the challenge. But Joeseph, this has been a pleasure. We appreciate you taking the time. You're very knowledgeable. We'll get your contact information here in just a little bit so our listeners can ask you some more questions. We learned about how solar panels work, because that was something that I don't know if we had really explored up until this point. So we got to get that information from you today. We got to talk about what some of the motivations would be for farmers to invest in solar. We talked about having that tax liability that we could potentially take advantage of these credits back as a deduction. We talked about the pure saving on power, managing your monthly energy expenses. We also talked about the use of the USDA's REAP grant and even USDA financing to be able to provide some cost share or reimbursement type programs, or even just true loan packages to help us put these together. That tax credit is still going to be a big incentive on the federal side of things. We know that the depreciation is available. So again, a lot of the incentives with solar take most 100% effectiveness when you have taxable income that you can reduce to save you on that tax liability. We know that the cost and size of a system is going to vary based upon your need and the size that you put together. But even if you can't use your tax credit, we do have new rules in 2023 that allows you to be able to sell that as well. So it'll be interesting to dive in if your operation is looking into solar as an alternative energy source, or maybe an investment into the future. It might be something to give Joeseph a call about. So how do they do that? How do they connect with you guys?
Well, you call me on my personal cell phone, which is 912-678-4350, or you can go online and go to SunChoiceEnergy.com.
Nice. So you guys over here, did you thumb wrestle out a challenge here?
Dave's got one.
I always got one. Yeah, I challenge people to make sure they listen to the relationship that they create, because it in my scenario, when we figured it out, I was glad that we went with a marriage, if you will, because it didn't turn out the way that Facebook made it look. So we had to make sure that we did that. So just challenge the process a little bit to listen, ask questions. So I would challenge people to ask questions about it. And if you're totally against solar, I don't know what to tell you. I guess I challenge you to maybe look into it more, and it's coming, and especially if every vehicle gets mandated to electric, it's definitely going to be huge.
Bill, what do you say to somebody who's just against solar, period?
I would 100% say this every single time. It would not hurt to get free information, right? Especially if you're a business owner, you should do everything you can to help reduce operating costs. And if I'm going to meet with you and put together a very technical, report, 30 years of weather data, do all this and put it together in a proposal for you for free, it would just make sense to look at it. Yep. It's not going to hurt.
And I'm just going to thank people for listening and keeping an open mind, even if you are against it. If you're going to complain about something, you might as well be informed on it.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And so at least listen and arm yourself with data. And then I would piggyback on, I do have a challenge. Just look into the REAP grants, period, for your farm. And solar might not be part of it. But I'm telling you, man, there's sheets of paper of lists of what qualifies. And you might already be doing the stuff already. And let me tell you what, you might be against government payments and all that, but if they're going to be putting it out there, and if you don't take it, your neighbor is, and you're at a disadvantage.
I got a challenge for you.
Yeah.
What does REAP stand for?
Rural Energy something program. Rural Energy for America. America program. I got it. You get it.
Aren't you glad that I got notes for you?
Oh, nice notes, huh? They down.
That's funny. Well, Joseph, thanks again for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. And listeners, we also thank you, just like Corey said. But until next time, have a good one.